Space+Divine Doctor+Female Qiang+Shuangwen+Plagiarism Exile. At the beginning of the game, Chuan Chuan was faced with Plagiarism Exile. Wen Gelan, who had only been the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister for a day, said not to panic. First, empty half of the warehouse, turn around and let all the things hidden on my aunt's body fall out, and then be annoyed by my scumbag father. The fiancé is unwilling to terminate the engagement, and the illegitimate sister wants to marry instead. Okay, I raised my hands and feet in agreement. I don't want to participate in royal disputes, I just want to be safe and sound on the road to exile. However, there was a fiancé who caused trouble, a scumbag father who gave everything for the country, and in the middle, there were aunts, concubines, and countless people trying to kill her. His Highness the Underworld King, can we now terminate our engagement? I understand what the princess means, let's get married now. Keywords of the novel. Plagiarism and exile. Don't panic, the system has no pop-up windows for grain storage, and is it a case of being exiled from home? Don't panic, download the complete set of garrison foot txt from the system, and do you want to be exiled to plagiarism? Don't panic, read the latest chapter on the system's grain storage and food management. Chapter 1. Being plagiarized and exiled at the beginning. You are listening at novel full.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 2. First meeting with fiancé A. You are listening at novel full.audio. Chapter 2. First meeting with fiancé A. Wen Gelan nodded obediently and pointed to the gold, silver, and jewelry placed in the boxes by 2 Tianwei soldiers. Mother, are those your dowries? The Tianwei army found them from Wen Gelan. Wen was even more shocked and felt a bit more guilty towards Mrs. Wen and her daughter. As Madam said, he is blind, biased, and treats bad people as good people. Prime Minister Wen, please. The captain of the Tianwei army was quite polite and made a gesture of invitation to Prime Minister Wen and his family. When you leave the mansion, you must follow the rules and put on your family's anklets. Wen nodded clearly, his eyes complex as he looked at the family and slowly walked out with heavy steps, feeling sorry for the family. Wen Gelan walked in the middle position, next to Lady Wen who was sipping low, followed by a concubine who was constantly crying and cursing, and several illegitimate women. Not far away was the Tianwei army carrying large boxes as they walked out. Her eyes were filled with regret. If given more time, she would definitely be able to pack all the things in the Prime Minister's mansion. After leaving the former Prime Minister's mansion, Wen Gelan and a few others were put on foot chains by the Tianwei army. Just then, a man sitting in a wheelchair was pushed over. The man was dressed in a jet black brocade robe, with a handsome face with a cold white skin tone, which was extremely beautiful. It was cold and indifferent, like winter snow. Looking cold, getting closer was even colder. His pants legs were a bit empty, and his exposed ankles were a bit abnormally thin. Isn't this the original fiancé A Nanrong Chuan? How did he come here? When Wengu was puzzled, he saw the Tianwei army quietly retreating to the side, without any intention of obstruction. His gaze at the man changed slightly. Everyone knows that Nanrong River is a peripheral idle prince with no real power, let alone being like today. However, the attitude of Tianwei army is very different. This man. I'm afraid it's not easy. Nan Rongchuan ignored Wen Shou's unusual gaze and didn't even glance at Wen Gelan. His attendant pushed a wheelchair to Wen and handed him a bundle. Prime Minister Wen used it on the road. His voice was very calm and he couldn't hear any emotions. Before Wen could say anything, Wen Gelan had already returned the package to Nan Rongchuan and said calmly, Your Highness the Underworld's kindness has been appreciated by our family. Wen Gelan, you want face, we don't want it. The bound Wang Yi struggled to pounce, trying to snatch the bundle. I was kicked and knocked over by Wen Gelan, and even rolled a few times. The disheveled Wenju got up and wanted to settle accounts with her, but was controlled by the Tianwei army. Be honest. If you dare to cause trouble again, I want you to look good. Wen Gelan, you despicable star. If you were willing to marry His Highness the Underworld, such a thing wouldn't have happened in our family, Wen Yu cried out in tears. Wen Gelan ignored her and handed the package to Nan Rongchuan again, saying, Your Highness the Underworld's kindness is well received by my family. But for our family now, these things are a life-threatening talisman. Nan Rongchuan's eyes cast a gloomy glance at Wen Gelan, and this young lady seemed quite different. Wen Gelan was wearing a wrinkled light purple dress, with no accessories on her whole body, and even her hair was a bit messy. Only her calm eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Is this the petite fiancée AE who seems to collapse in the wind? If it weren't for these, your family would have died faster, he said indifferently. Wen Gelan was well aware of this and even more aware of the hardships and dangers on the road of exile. Even so, we cannot accept it. She stuffed the bundle into Nan Rongchuan's arms and gave a blessing according to her original memory, saying, Thank you very much, Your Highness the Underworld, for coming to see our family off today. Now that my family is in exile, our engagement should come to an end. She took up her original body in order to have a second life, and should take care of her original parents both emotionally and logically. As for marriage, she never thought about living a good life by relying on it to avoid being exiled. Nan Rongchuan frowned slightly and said with some annoyance, Your Majesty has not terminated the marriage. Even if you refuse to marry me again, you will have to enter the door of my underworld mansion the next day. Wen Gelan's eyes darkened as he retrieved the current situation from his original memory. In today's old age, the control over the court is much weaker, and with the princes reaching adulthood, the conflict between them has become increasingly intense. Therefore, except for a very small number of loyalists and those with ulterior motives, the courtiers have already stood in line, and their children have also become pawns in this battle to seize the throne. Your Majesty's accusation of marrying the original body and the underworld king is due to suspicion towards him, or is it to suppress the literary family? Or perhaps it has other intentions. It seems that the road to exile will not be peaceful. As soon as she spoke, she heard the accent. I am willing to marry. Wen Gelan knelt in front of Nan Rongchuan, clasping her hands and pleading, Your Highness, I used to marry into the underworld palace on behalf of my sister. My sister looks down on you, slanders you everywhere, and refuses to marry you. Wen Gelan hugged her arms and stood there, looking at her with mocking eyes, without interrupting. If this marriage offer can be lifted, it would be a good thing for her. In the current situation, marrying any prince is not a good thing. You don't deserve it. Nan Rongchuan didn't take a glance at Wen Gelan, his cold voice mixed with disgust. His Highness the Underworld is absolutely right. At this moment, a joyful woman's voice came from a high school. Wen Gelan followed the sound and saw a beautifully dressed family walking over, speaking to the woman who was walking the next step. She was petite and lovely, and at first glance, it would make people like her. It's a second room. Erfong was selfish and cunning. After the old lady passed away, her father forcefully divided the family and cut off contact with Erfong. Erfong had many complaints about this, and many of them were secretly plotting against their family. Now that the second room has come over, it is clear that they are here to lay stones in the well. Erfong stood tall and proud in the posture of the Wen Gelan family, looking at them with the eyes of ants and behaving like a winner. You greedy and lawless beasts of your family. Wen Weiner raised her head slightly and looked at the Wen Gelan family with the eyes of ants. Everyone, hurry up and take a look. It's this selfish and malicious thing of this family that has killed countless innocent people for the sake of profit. Hurry up and kill them, we can't let them live well. Finally, it's the day when I'm proud and proud. The big house has been weighing down on them for so many years, and now it's their turn to stand out and slowly tidy up the big house. The onlookers pointed and and there were also many who smashed eggs, vegetables, and leaves at the Wen Gelan family. Corrupt officials. Damn corrupt officials. You go to hell. It's because of you corrupt officials that our common people are living such a miserable life, smashing them to death. How despicable. Your Majesty is kind and only exiled these corrupt officials. If you ask me, they should be cut to pieces. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. This is the punishment for you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. This is the punishment for you. Before Wen Gelan could hide, she was tightly held in her arms by Wen Ying and Lady Wan, preventing her from being harmed at all. This caused a ripple in her heart. She noticed that her parents were trying to suppress their sadness, and let out a light sigh. She has just started wearing more and more clothes, and she doesn't have much emotion. On the other hand, my father, although his family affairs were chaotic, did many good deeds for the country and the people, but ended up in such a situation. It's really sad and lamentable. Second Master, please save our mother and daughter. Aunt Chun knelt down in front of the second room, holding on to Wen Gelan, pleading weakly and helplessly. This scene made Wen Gelan angry from her heart, and she sneered, but it didn't happen now. Let's go. It's time to get on the road. Tianwei army said in a wicked voice, when we wait outside the city, there will be officials taking over. Under the protection of her parents, Wen Gu walked forward quickly. She saw Tianwei army forcibly dragging Aunt Chun and her daughter, ignoring their cries, and felt a little relieved in her heart. Later, she slowly reconciled with this mother and daughter. As she passed by the second room, she heard Wen Wanner's words with a murderous intent hidden in her excitement. Uncle, your family must live well. A sharp light flashed through the bottom of Wen Gelan's eyes. Taking advantage of the close proximity to Wen Wanner, she secretly took out a little medicinal powder from the space and applied it to Wen Wanner's sleeve. Unexpectedly, he turned his head and plunged into a pair of emotionless black eyes, his eyebrows twitching twice. Was this discovered by Nan Rongchuan? But when she saw Nan Rongchuan turn his head directly and then left, the monk Ruzhang Air couldn't figure it out. What did he mean by this? Wen Gelan couldn't afford to think too much. Now she needs to think carefully about how to survive the exile and find a way to help her father overturn the case. If the case is not overturned, their family will never have a good life, and they will be prisoners for life, even their descendants will be greatly affected. She glanced at Wen Ying, thinking of finding an opportunity to talk to him about this case and perhaps get some clues. When the family left the summer capital, except for Wen Gelan, everyone else was dirty and disheveled, and Aunt Chun and Wen Yu had their skin torn in many places. The pain made both of them cry, as if they had been severely injured. The Tianwei army handed over the Wenjia people to the officials and returned to the palace to report. Wen Gelan glanced at 5 officials and noticed 2 of them secretly exchanging glances, occasionally scrutinizing their family, showing a bit of vigilance. An official took the anklets of several people from Wen Gelan without any concern that they would escape. Hurry up. Now you're not official family anymore. A dark middle-aged official whipped the ground and said fiercely, if you dare not listen, my whip doesn't have eyes. Wen Gelan supported her parents and followed behind the official in front, ignoring the murmuring of Aunt Chun and her daughter, silently reminding them. Mom and Dad, it seems that there are 2 officials who are not quite right. Let's be careful. Wen Ying looked at her with a gloomy expression and let out a low hum, be careful all the way, don't show off your temporary aura. Wen Gelan gently patted Mrs. Wen's hand and comforted her with his eyes. Just as he was about to think about how to settle down next, he suddenly received a whip on his back. She almost screamed in pain. She looked at the official who was attacking her with a cold and angry look in her eyes, and finally resisted the impulse to use the medicine powder. Look again, I'll give you a few whips. The official viciously swung the whip a few times, lifted his head slightly, and looked at Wen Gelan with a proud attitude. The daughter of a corrupt official, even if she kills you, no one will speak for you. Wen Gelan was aware of this and resisted the urge to use medicinal powder. She said coldly, if our family were exiled, there would be something, or if it would slow down the journey, you wouldn't be able to do well either. There are regulations for officials who escort prisoners. If unable to arrive on time, there will be certain penalties. What nonsense! The captain scolded the official and said angrily, if you dare to cause trouble again, get out of here. This is still at the feet of the emperor. If you don't want to die, we still need to die. The official quickly turned into a flattering face and looked at the Wen Gelan family with a sinister gaze. Wen Gelan squinted her eyes and helped her parents continue on their journey, pondering how to kill chickens and warn monkeys so that these officials wouldn't dare to bully and plan their family at will. Gelan, are you okay? Mrs. Wen shed tears of heartache and complained even more about Wen Ying. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. If it weren't for what you did wrong, Gelan wouldn't have suffered such a crime. She's a delicate young lady, how can she bear these things? If there's something in Gelan, I'll never finish with you. When the old ladies were alive, they favored Aunt Chun and her daughter, causing her to lose 2 children and unable to conceive again. Even Gelan was calculated multiple times by this mother and daughter, but the master did not make decisions for them. Now, the master has also implicated Gelan in such a great crime. Wen Ying pursed her lips and looked guilty. Mother, you can't blame your father for this. When Gelan endured the burning pain in his back and comforted him softly, Dad doesn't want such a thing to happen anymore. Besides, the most important thing now is the unity of the family, not the time to talk about it. It's useless to make trouble on the road of exile. The most important thing is to unite and have a chance to survive. Madame Wen was not unaware of these things, but rather a long-standing resentment erupted at this moment. Gelan, I will protect you along the way. We don't care about that heartless man. Wen Gelan saw Wen Ying's bitter smile and was about to persuade Mrs. Wen a few more words when he was scolded by the team leader. Is there still spiritual chat? Then hurry up. This is not for you to play. Wen Gelan had no choice but to stop talking and support her parents as they walked out quickly, without any intention of caring about the people behind her. She didn't have such great abilities. But after only a few steps, Aunt Chun and Wen Gelan couldn't walk anymore, shouting, I'm so tired and thirsty. Do you have any water? There's a whip. The captain swung several whips at the mother and daughter. Do you still consider yourself the aunties and ladies of the official family? Now you are prisoners, said fiercely, hurry up and drive for me. If you dare to delay a little longer, I want you to look good. Aunt Chun and Wenju ran forward with mournful cries, afraid of any further delay, afraid that the whip would fall on them again. Summer Capital. As the victorious Wen Wanner was preparing to board the carriage with her family, she suddenly heard the screams of her maid in terror. Miss, your face, your face. Wen Weiner instinctively touched her face and felt countless red bumps. She panicked and covered her face with her sleeve, saying, my face, what's wrong with my face? Hurry up, take me to the clinic and find the best doctor to show me my face. However, her appearance has already fallen into the eyes of many people. Ugh! Her dignity is so disgusting, I almost vomited up the next night's meal. I'm scared, I'm afraid I'll have a nightmare tonight. How could there be such an ugly woman in this world? It's a shame she had the face to come out. If it were me, I would have jumped into the river and committed suicide earlier. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Wants to harm her. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 wants to harm her. Upon hearing these words, Wen Wanner cried angrily. She didn't understand why she had become like this, but she knew she needed to heal her face as soon as possible, otherwise she wouldn't want to marry into the royal family. The exiled Wen Gelan family, under the urging of officials, rushed slowly and arrived at a dilapidated temple at sunset, which was already a certain distance from the summer capital. Several officials were divided into 2 batches, one was cooking and the other was responsible for guarding and keeping an eye on the prisoners. Aunt Chun and Lady Wen were huddled in the corner, occasionally exchanging glances or glancing at Lady Wen and Lady Wen. Wen Gelan didn't care about the eyes of the mother and daughter. She covered them with wide sleeves and took out the corresponding Western medicine from the space. Noticing the haggard and tired parents, the mother kept massaging her legs and gently helped her massage. But being pushed away by Lady Wen, she said wearily, "I'm fine, you rest well." Just as Wen Gelan was about to say it was okay, he saw an official carrying a large basin walking over. Dinner. An official sent black and hard mantou to Wen Gelan. Aunt Chun and a few others complained. Such a hard mantou, even the lowest servant in the family would not eat it before. How can you swallow it? This mantou sticks in my throat and my eyes hurt. I can't eat it. Woo-woo, I don't want to eat such hard mantou. It will hurt my throat. If it hurts my throat, my voice will become ugly. I don't want my voice to become ugly. Wen Gelan gestured to her parents not to eat yet. She seemed to be taking out a silver ingot or two from her sleeve, but in reality, she took it out of space and handed it to the team leader. "Please, we'd like to exchange 5 mantou and 1 water bag." The captain was quite surprised. He thought it was a hard job with no profit, but he didn't expect to make a profit. He was about to take the silver when an official surnamed Wang rushed over and raised his whip to strike Wen Gelan, saying, "Captain, we can't accept it. The source of her silver is unknown." This official surnamed Wang is the one who whipped Wen Gelan. Wen Gelan calmly dodged and retreated to his parents, shaking his head to show that he was okay. Immediately afterwards, she saw Wang Guancha being kicked and thrown to the ground by the team captain, and even being whipped twice with a soft snort. Regardless of whether her silver source is legitimate or not, according to the rules of escorting prisoners, prisoners can use silver to show filial piety to officials or buy things from them, which is also a way for officials to earn money. If you dare to do anything again, I have a way to deal with you. Don't think I don't know what you're up to. The team leader spat and looked at Wen Gelan. "You come and exchange." Wen Gelan exchanged 1 or 2 silver coins for 5 white mantou and a water bag. She gave her parents a mantou, and let them drink water and eat a white mantou. Mississippi. Aunt Chun licked her face and smiled blandly. "Miss, we are a family. Can you give me these 2 mantou?" Wen Gelan glanced at Aunt Chun with a cool smile, slowly bit the white mantou, and sighed with satisfaction. "This white mantou is really soft and delicious, and I have water to drink. If anyone can give our family a good massage, I will give him a white mantou and some water." Before the words could be finished, several aunties and concubines had already pushed aside Aunt Chun, smiling and massaging Wen Gelan and the others, occasionally asking if they were comfortable. Wen Gelan takes a mouthful of mantou and a mouthful of water, enjoying the massage of these people. Her eyes sneered at Aunt Chun and Wang Yu, who could not squeeze them out, and smiled and gave the 2 white mantou to the concubines, who also gave them some water. "We are a family, as long as you are obedient, I will take care of you all along the way." Several concubines shared 2 white mantou and water, and ate them greedily. Aunt Chun's mother and daughter swallowed and hated Wen Gelan more. "How dare you not give them food?" Late night. The dilapidated temple in the wilderness is quiet, and the sound of insects can be faintly heard. The night is like a big net covering the earth, bringing unease and fear. The officials and prisoners who had been driving all day fell into a deep sleep. Suddenly, a figure walked stealthily towards Wen Gelan, occasionally glancing at Wen Wei. When he approached Wen Gelan, he smirked and wanted to pounce on him, but at this moment, Wen Gelan, who was not yet asleep, raised her hand and threw a large handful of medicinal powder at the person who was rushing towards her, while rolling to the side. Immediately, a piercing man screamed, "My eyes! My face! It hurts so much! You damn bitch, I must kill you today." He pulled out his sword and casually chopped, "I want to kill you, I want to kill you." Wen Gelan remained calm in the face of danger. She quickly walked over to Lady Wen with her cat body, dragging her to the side. However, she found that Wen Ying was not there, feeling puzzled. Where did Dad go in the middle of the night? Without much thought, she pulled the panicked Lady Wen and hid in the corner, shouting to the awakened official, "He's going to kill us, stop him." The team leader looked at her with an unclear expression, and together with several officials, subdued Wang Guanxia and tied him up. Bastard! The team captain kicked him fiercely, showing no sympathy for him. "If you do these things with me, then you can stay here for the rest of your life." Wang Guan almost listened and begged for mercy in a panic, "Captain, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please give me another way to survive. He hasn't completed the task assigned to him yet. If he dies here, his entire family won't be able to survive." Upon hearing this, Wen Gelan ignored the rest and carefully observed the surroundings, wanting to see where Wen Ying was. Unexpectedly, in a relatively secluded shadow, she discovered an incredible person. Isn't that the underworld king Nan Rongchuan? How could he be here in the middle of the night? And, isn't the person standing next to Nanrong River really my dad? These two people a thought came to Wen Gelan's mind as she squinted her sharp eyes and met Nan Rongchuan. The sudden family theft, Tianwei Jun's attitude, seems that this family theft exile is not as simple as it seems on the surface. In the night sky, her calm and composed eyes were particularly bright, causing Nan Rongchuan to squint slightly. This woman has undergone significant changes, with a look of scrutiny and estimation in her eyes, completely devoid of the previous disgust and avoidance. In this situation, she didn't argue or disturb anyone at all, just stared at him like this, "Prime Minister Wen, your eldest daughter is not a simple person. She used to be afraid of being clumsy," he said indifferently. Wen Ying was very puzzled and couldn't figure it out. He knew Gelan's temperament the best. "What's going on today? Your Highness, perhaps she has experienced such a great upheaval in her relationship." Nanrong Chuan let out an indifferent hum, lightly tapping on the armrest of his wheelchair, and then he heard a sentence from Wen Gelan. "Can I fix your legs? Do you want to make a deal with me?" End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Malicious Spring Auntie and Daughter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Malicious Spring Auntie and Daughter. Nan Rongchuan's movements paused, his eyes slightly changed, he touched his unconscious legs, and then pushed the wheelchair away. Wen Gelan didn't care about his attitude and knew he wasn't so easy to believe. The reason why she is willing to help Nanrong Chuan treat his leg is twofold. Firstly, she wants to know what happened to this family plagiarism exile, and secondly, she wants to resolve this matter as soon as possible. My intuition told her that this man is not simple, he and his father are planning a big deal. Seeing Wen Ying walking over, several officials did not inquire, and her guess in her heart increased a bit. "Since we're all awake, let's continue on our journey." The captain waved his whip twice with a torch, "Hurry up and don't delay the journey." Wen Gelan helped Lady Wen follow, followed by Wen Ying and his concubine, followed by several officials and the dragged Wang officials. However, not long after we left, Mother. Wen Gelan dragged the unconscious Lady Wen and pinched the person pinching her, giving her a pulse. "Mother, wake up, Mother." "Madam." Wen Ying was anxious and worried, squatting next to Madam Wen. "Madam, what's wrong with you?" Aunt Chun and her daughter were gloating, while other concubines surrounded them. "Hurry up and leave." The squad leader scolded, "If you're not dead, just leave for me. Do you still consider yourself an official lady?" Wen Gelan withdrew his hand from the pulse, pushed away Wen Ying who was about to carry Lady Wen, and a concubine helped Lady Wen walk forward. "Dad, take good care of yourself. Mom doesn't dare to work hard on you." My mother was overwhelmed with anger and worry, coupled with the fainting caused by the tireless journey day and night. If this disease is not properly nurtured, it is easier to cure if it falls behind. One mistake could easily result in losing one's life. Wen Ning gave her a deep glance and followed behind to protect Lady Wen. The group continued on their journey. At the edge of the sky, the fish belly gradually turned white, and a deep red sun slowly peeked out from the horizon before slowly rising into the air. The temperature is getting higher and higher. Wen Ge was sweating profusely, and his throat was hot and smoking. She shook the water in her water bag with her empty hand, thinking about how to put the water in the space without being detected. Just as I fed Mrs. Wen some water, to my surprise, Wen Ge suddenly rushed out and reached out to grab the water bag. "Give me the water. Bitch, give me the water quickly, or I'll kill you." Wen Gelan couldn't hold her steady for a moment, but under the conditioned reflex, she grabbed it again and felt fragrant with her feet. "Wen Gelan, please let go of me." Wen Ge was kicked but didn't let go, and even pulled hard. Result, wow. The water bag fell to the ground, and the water inside spilled all over the ground. "Ha ha ha, I can't drink it, no one wants to drink it." Wen Ge growled with a fierce expression on her face. Wen Gelan quickly picked up the water bag on the ground and stepped on her face, saying, "You're very proud, aren't you? Dad, look at her, big sister is so outrageous." Wen Ge cried pitifully to Wen Ning. "But now she is dirty, tears leaving marks on her face, not to mention how ugly and unsightly she is." She pretended to be pitiful again, and it was extremely ugly, just like her inner self. Wen Ning ignored her and thought that she would have to bring some water for Madam to drink later. Madam needs to drink more water in this situation. "You." As Wen Gelan was about to confront Wen Ge, he suddenly heard a piercing woman scream. "There are assassins." Wen Gelan turned his head and saw several masked men holding sharp blades rushing towards them, apparently intending to kill them. He quickly carried Lady Wen on his back and ran to the side, taking out a lot of medicinal powder from the space. Her eyebrows and eyes were tinged with a cold forest. From various signs, it can be seen that the reason why the Wen family was plagiarized and faced these things is closely related to their father. It is what their father did in secret that led to this series of things, not just the surface claims of corruption and lawlessness. In her second thought, she was already surrounded by two assassins. Seeing two assassins fiercely wielding their swords and stabbing towards her, she raised her hand and grabbed a large handful of medicinal powder, then carried Lady Wen on her back and ran towards the other side. In my ears, screams, cries for help, and cries, intertwined with the sound of swords colliding, formed a mournful melody. In vain, Wen Gelan was pushed down by someone, causing Lady Wen to fall heavily to the ground. "Mother." She ignored the scraped wound and quickly helped up Mrs. Wen to check her condition. After confirming that Mrs. Wen was not in any serious way, she glared angrily at Wenju who had run away. Okay, Wen Ge dares to take advantage of the chaos and push her and her mother down. When she is out of danger, she will slowly settle accounts with her. When she was about to stand up, there were waves of pain in her ankle. After checking, she knew it was a sprain, so she had to sit in place to protect Mrs. Wen, holding several packets of medicine powder in her hand. In this gap, an assassin rushed over with his sword in hand. He raised his reflective sword high, his eyes full of killing intent. When Wen Gelan dared to sprinkle medicinal powder, she was forcefully pushed from behind, causing her to lean forward. At this moment, she instinctively protected Lady Wen in her arms and sprinkled medicinal powder on the assassin. Just as she swept the medicine powder, her left half of her body hit the ground. Especially when her hand joint suddenly hit the ground, the pain made her face furrow together. Seeing the assassin lying down, she looked fiercely at Aunt Chun and her daughter, thinking of 10,000 ways to deal with them. It seems that her methods were too light, which made this mother and daughter dare to harm her again and again. Aunt Chun and Wenju hid in the corner, looking at each other regretfully. The despicable fate of the wife and daughter is really hard, they haven't died yet. Mother, why don't we give it a try again? Wen Ge was extremely unwilling. We can't miss such a good opportunity. Aunt Chun shook her head and said, the assassin has already run away. If we continue to attack, we will be. Before she could finish speaking, she was suddenly shrouded in a cold shadow and couldn't help but tremble. What will happen? Wen Gelan stood in front of the mother and daughter, looking down at them from a high position. Do you think I won't really do anything to your mother and daughter? As she spoke, she sprinkled a handful of powder on the mother and daughter, saying, don't worry, it's not some deadly powder, it's just a little powder that will make you feel wonderful and painful. You. Ah. It hurts. It hurts. Aunt Chun rolled on the ground in pain, constantly grabbing herself with her hands. It's so itchy, so painful, so itchy. Wen Gelan, your wicked heart, how could it harm me and Miss Air like this? Wen Gelan stood there coldly, watching Aunt Chun and her daughter writhing and screaming in pain, with a murderous smile on her lips. Compared to your mother and daughter's cruelty, my cruelty is nothing. Aunt Chun, Wenju, you should be grateful that this is on the road of exile, otherwise I have 10,000 ways to make your mother and daughter suffer to death. She leaned down slightly, word by word with a sinister aura. I will warn you mother and daughter once again. If you dare to plan against me and my mother again, or do anything wrong, I will make you suffer to death. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Such a father, don't forget it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Such a father, don't forget it. Aunt Chun and Wenju were in excruciating pain, and for the first time, the mother and daughter experienced the feeling of life being less than death. Unfortunately, they were both afraid of death. Master, master, help. Miss is going to kill us. Dad, Dad, I'm dying soon. Come and save me, sister is going to kill me and my aunt. Wen Gelan stood there coldly, looking at Aunt Chun and her daughter with a deadly gaze. My methods are not tough enough to give you the strength to speak, he said. She is still too kind. Gelan, what are you doing? Wen Ying quickly walked over and pushed her away with force, angrily scolding, how could you be so cruel and have such a cruel hand on your aunt and sister? One of Wen Gelan's scripts was twisted, and she, who couldn't stand steadily, was pushed to almost fall to the ground. She was a bit disappointed with her father and said, Father, I didn't want to dwell on the things you favored Spring Aunt and her daughter in the past because of our family's exile relationship. At this point, she let out a long breath and said, I was wrong. People's hearts are inherently biased, and you are so biased towards Aunt Chun and her daughter. How could you ask how vicious these mother and daughter have done to me and my mother? She spoke in the calmest tone of her voice about the danger just now. If it weren't for my good luck and hiding some medicinal powder by my side, what you would see now would be the bodies of me and my mother, rather than Aunt Chun and her daughter accusing and framing me here. Aunt Chun and Wenju would never admit this matter. No. Master, you are the person who knows me the best. How could I do such a thing? It was the young lady who framed me. Dad, it was so dangerous just now that my daughter couldn't hide in time. How could she have done such a malicious thing? Wen Ying had some doubts and didn't quite believe it. Gelan, did your aunt and sister really do such a thing? Shouldn't it be, did you frame them? Wen Gu let out a sound and said nothing more, limping towards Lady Wen's side. Her behavior made Wen Ying even more distrustful of her. Gelan, give her the antidote. You are so malicious that you have done such a thing. This is your aunt and sister. Wen Gelan doesn't want to talk to him. Starting from today, Dad won't be able to get a little food or a sip of water from her. Since he is so biased towards Aunt Chun and her daughter, let Aunt Chun and her daughter help him. Dad, I saw second sister push down big sister and madam with my own eyes, said third Miss Wenj timidly. At that time, second sister had a malicious smile on her face. After pushing down big sister, she ran away. At that time, when I was panicking and avoiding assassins, I didn't see if Aunt Chun had pushed big sister and madam. Some concubines and concubines said they saw it. Master, I saw with my own eyes that Aunt Chun had pushed down the young lady while the assassin was assassinating her. If it weren't for the young lady's powder, the master would not have seen her and her by now. At that time, second sister and Aunt Chun laughed so maliciously that they looked like they were going to kill Madam and first sister, which made my heart skip a beat. Aunt Chun and Wenju are usually favored and rely on their affection to make things difficult for their concubines, causing harm to many people. So, when a mother and daughter encounter difficulties, there are often people who fall into the well and throw stones at them. Upon hearing these words, Wen Ying was shocked and incredulous, looking at Aunt Chun and her daughter with a buzzing sound in her head. What did he do just now? Before figuring out the situation, he favored Aunt Chun and her daughter, and even said that about Gelan. No wonder Gelan wouldn't want to say another word to him. Master, it's not like this. I beg the master to help me and Miss Eyre get the antidote. Aunt Chun fainted in pain and woke up again, unable to bear the pain. Wen Ying took a few steps back and then quickly walked up to Wen Gelan, apologizing, Gelan. Could you please help me lift my mother? Wen Gelan didn't see him and said to several concubines, I will do my best to take care of you all along the way. A few concubines and concubines ran over, discussing how to carry a section of the road, which would be easier, while others supported Wen Gelan. As for Aunt Chun and Wenju, no one cares about the mother and daughter as they deserve. Gelan. Wen Ying called out again. Wen Gelan still ignored him and slowly walked forward, holding on to Wen Geqing's hand. Third sister, thank you very much for helping me speak. From now on, big sister will take care of you. She remembers that Wen Geqing's birth mother was killed by Aunt Chun. But at that time, someone took the blame, and the father favored Aunt Chun, so this matter came to an end. Wen Geqing glanced at Wen Ying and timidly nodded at Wen Gelan, asking with concern, Sister, is your foot serious? It seems that your hand is also injured. Do you want to find a place to bandage it? These words made Wen Ying feel even more guilty and self-blaming. What kind of father is he? He doesn't trust his legitimate daughter so much and says such things to her. Gelan, Dad will find medicine to bandage you up. This will leave behind the root of your illness. Wen Gu said in a faint voice, I dare not trouble Mr. Wen. If you have this time, please care more about Aunt Chun and her beloved daughter who cares about you. I am such a malicious thing, so I won't bother you anymore. She scanned around and found that the remaining assassins had run away at some point, with 2 officials injured. These 2 officials casually bandaged up and shouted to them to hurry, while 2 other officials dragged Aunt Chun and her daughter away. Looking up at the sun, she had to find a way to get some water and food so that she could take out the food from the space. Gelan. Wen Ying leaned over and wanted to help. Being waved away by Wen Gelan, she accidentally pulled her injury, causing her to frown in pain. Big brother, could you please stay away from me? I'm afraid my injury will worsen because of him, she said. Big brother Wen Haran has a dull and reserved nature. Upon hearing this, he forcefully dragged Wen Ying aside without saying a word. Haran, your older sister is injured, I have to help her. Wen Ying couldn't break free. Wen Haran said in a dull tone, is Dad helping big sister, or is he trying to harm big sister again? Wen Ying was speechless and blushed with embarrassment. It seems that except for Guyu, all the children are very dissatisfied and have complaints about him. He is a failed father. Wen Gelan's feet and hands hurt severely, and she wanted to stop immediately for treatment, but she knew she couldn't. At least when she's resting, she'll have a way to treat herself. Looking back, she glanced at Aunt Chun and her daughter who were being dragged, and her mood slightly improved. With the passage of time, the sun was getting hotter and hotter, and the physical strength of Wen Gelan and his companions was almost reaching their limit. More importantly, they were thirsty and their throats seemed to be smoking. Wen Gelan raised his hand to wipe the sweat off his forehead and looked at the captain who was drinking water. He swallowed a small amount of saliva and said, Officer, do you sell this water bag? The captain wiped his mouth and glared fiercely at Wang Guancha, who wanted to speak. He said to Wen Gelan, "Sell it. 5 taels of silver each, something you haven't drunk before." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Unchanged Thief. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Unchanged Thief. Wen Gelan felt heartbroken, but she understood that on her way to exile, the price was already very reasonable. "I'll buy it." She gritted her teeth and seemingly took out a silver ingot of 5 taels from her sleeve, but in reality, she made a deal with the captain and said, "I don't know, can I borrow one of your bowls?" Su Shi just received 5 taels of silver, and the team leader happily borrowed a bowl for her. Wen Gelan dared not stop. She poured half a bowl of water and handed it to Lady Wen, who was still unconscious, carefully letting her drink it. Then, she poured another bowl of water for the concubine carrying her back. Later, she asked Wen Geqing and a few others to drink water one by one, and finally she drank again. As for Weining and Aunt Chun and their daughter, I'm really sorry that she didn't have such a good heart to drink water for these 3 people. But Weining had half a bowl of water given by her eldest son, so she didn't die of thirst. He looked at Wen Gelan apologetically and reproachfully, sighing. No wonder Gelan treated him like this, he hurt the child's heart. Finally, when it was dark, Wen Gelan and a few people couldn't walk anymore and sat on the ground to rest. "My feet are all blistered, it hurts so much." "Me too." "You can't pick it open, it hurts even more, and it's also prone to inflammation and ulceration. How can we keep going like this?" Wen Gelan looked at several sparkling blisters on the soles of her feet. There were medicines in the space to treat blisters, but she couldn't take them out. She wasn't sure if these people would harm her for her own sake. She rubbed her sour and aching legs, and was so hungry that she pressed her chest against her back, thinking about how to get some food. She could not eat the black mantu, but she could not take out the silver, which would be too eye-catching. "What's wrong with me?" Upon hearing Mrs. Wen's confused voice, Wen Gelan couldn't think much and quickly helped her sit up carefully. "Mother, have you felt any discomfort? You fell and fainted when you encountered an assassin during the day. Gelan, are you okay?" Mrs. Wen thought of this and her face changed greatly. She quickly checked her daughter's condition. Wen Gelan said it was okay and comforted him softly, "Mom, it's all over now. We'll be fine from now on. Hurry up and pick up firewood, find something to eat." A round-faced official shouted with a commanding voice, "There's no food without doing anything. Hurry up, otherwise my whip won't recognize people." The concubines and concubines complained softly and were unwilling to move. They were really too tired to walk a step. Upon hearing the words, Wen Gelan's eyes twitched and he already had an idea. "Mother, big brother, third sister, let's go pick up firewood." She supported Wen Geqing's hand and stood up, slowly playing with Mrs. Wen and Wen Haran as they walked by. No official is watching, and even the official is not afraid that a few people from Wen Gelan will run away. In this wilderness, he is a repeat offender. If he doesn't have the courage to run, he will run. Without a guide, it's useless. "Gelan, I'll help you." Weining followed up. Wen Gelan said indifferently, "I dare not. If I ask Mr. Wen for help, I cannot tell how you will scold me. I am not willing to bear this injustice." "Weining, what have you done to your daughter again?" Madame Wen knew what had happened as soon as she heard it, and her anger surged upwards. "Aren't you enough to harm our mother and daughter? How else will you harm Gelan before you give up? Get out of here, get out of here. I don't want to see you for a moment." "Madam, how could you speak to the master like this?" Aunt Chun, who was both embarrassed and covered in injuries, seized the opportunity to persuade her with seemingly kind words. The master's lesson to the young lady is for her good. The young lady has no reason to be angry with the master. This is unfilial. Pop pop pop. Madame Wen slapped her several times and said coldly, in the past, you calculated on me and Gelan everywhere. I endured it for Gelan's future. Now on the road to exile, what else should I endure you for? Aunt Chun, I tell you, if you dare to play any more tricks, I will immediately sell you to these officials. Aunt Chun stared blankly, not expecting the usually gentle and easy-to-bully lady to do such a thing. Master, look at Madam. My whole body is focused on her and Miss, but she treats me like this. Master, you have to make decisions for my whole body. Wen Ning stood far away, with a cold voice filled with annoyance. I don't want to eat this kind of thing, get out of here. Aunt Chun stiffened there, unable to accept how Wen Ning would treat her. Master. Wen Ning didn't even give her a single penny, so she continued to follow Lady Wen and her daughter to win their hearts. Several concubines mocked Aunt Chun. Aunt Chun doesn't even look at what kind of ghost she looks like now. Even beggars would despise her. It's fortunate that she has the face to pretend to be pitiful in front of the master. Can the master forgive her for harming her husband and young lady like Wen Gelan? Without the master's protection, Aunt Chun and her daughter have suffered a lot along the way, even eating and drinking became a problem. If you ask me, it's not that these mother and daughter are foolish. They are all calculating, forgetting that this is on the road of exile. We can only save our lives by uniting. Upon hearing these, Aunt Chun showed no remorse or thought she had done anything wrong, but instead developed even greater resentment and unwillingness. If it weren't for the fact that Madam comes from a big family, she would have been rehabilitated long ago. How could this slut treat her so well? Wait, she has a way to deal with this slut and her daughter. Wen Gelan and a few others walked to a small forest, picking up firewood and searching for something to eat. Gelan, your hand is injured, I'll help you with it. Wen Ning leaned in to please. Wen Gelan expressionlessly placed a branch in his arms and led Mrs. Wen to Wen Geqing's side. He quietly took out some bread and mineral water from the laboratory space. Eat and drink quickly, don't leave, it's easy to have problems. She divided the water and bread between Wen Geqing and the three of them, opened the bread and ate it herself, occasionally taking a sip of water. Wen Haoran and Wen Geqing glanced at each other, and then gave Wen Ning water and bread, while he ate them separately from Wen Geqing. Madam Wen wanted to leave half for Wen Gelan to eat tomorrow, but she understood that this thing could not be left, and she couldn't ask where Gelan came from. It is extremely difficult to live on this exile road. After Wen Gelan had eaten and drank enough, he took a few more bread and water and handed them to Wen Haoran, saying, Big brother, let's go and exchange them later. You let them share the food, don't say anything that shouldn't be said. She didn't mean to keep it a secret, but the premise of keeping it a secret is to have a life to live. More importantly, someone had to help them along the way to believe. Wen Haoran didn't ask a question he shouldn't have asked. He nodded heavily and his wooden face was very sincere. Don't worry, big sister. I will say it's me hiding it. Wen Gelan smiled and didn't say anything more. He and Mrs. Wen went to the side to pick up firewood. While picking up firewood, she wiped her ankles and hand joints with medicine, and her ankles swelled up like dough. Gelan. Wen Ning moved over and pointed to the mineral water. Where did you get this from? End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Real Concubine Trading. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Real Concubine Trading. Wen Gelan ignored Wen Ning. She and Mrs. Wen each carried some firewood and slowly walked towards the resting place. Gelan, do you know how important these things are to the court? Wen Ning stopped her with a slightly heavy tone. Why didn't you take out such good things earlier? Such good things can help countless people. Before Wen Gelan could argue with him, she saw Lady Wen push him away with force and then throw firewood at him, saying, So, is mother so fierce? The court, the court, the court. In your heart, besides the court, there is only Aunt Chun and her daughter. Madam Wen's accumulated resentment erupted at this moment. When did you think about our mother and daughter, the rest of the family, and the whole family. Over the years, whenever I say something to you, you always get impatient. No matter what Aunt Chun and her daughter say, you are very patient and happy. Even in those years, I was miscarried twice by Aunt Chun and couldn't conceive again. You believe Aunt Chun's words, thinking that I used my child to frame her, and you don't treat me well. She really has enough of these days. Wen Ning felt guilty and apologetic. In terms of family matters, it's me who apologized to you. But as a vassal, I should consider the court. These two things. Pop. Madam Wen slapped him in the face and angrily pointed at him. Wen Ning, I'll leave it here. If you dare to say these two things or something about Gelan to the public, I'll hold you to death. She said decisively, don't think I'm joking. I can do anything for the sake of Gelan. Wen Ning stared blankly at her. The lady, who had always been gentle and good-tempered, was so angry. Mother, why waste your breath with such people? Wen Gelan gently patted Mrs. Wen's back and comforted her softly, since he likes Aunt Chun and her daughter so much, let him live with them for a lifetime. Let's live our lives together. Madam Wen wiped away a handful of bitter tears and nodded straight. Gelan, my mother will protect you from now on and won't let you suffer any more injustice. As for this kind of person, just live a good life with his beloved Aunt Chun and her daughter, don't come looking for us. At this point, she said to Wen Haran and Wen Geqing, in the future, you are not allowed to give him a sip of water or food. Let him find Aunt Chun and her daughter to serve him. Wen Haran and Wen Geqing nodded silently and agreed, showing no sympathy for their father. In those years, my father favored Wen Gyue and ignored them, allowing Aunt Chun and her daughter to bully them. If it weren't for the sake of family affection, they wouldn't care about their father. Master Wen, take good care of your beloved concubine and daughter, Wen Gelan said, holding on to the firewood and walking back with Lady Wen. Wen Ning sat there with a gloomy expression, and Wen Haran and Wen Geqing had no intention of comforting him. They did whatever they wanted. Wen Gelan and Lady Wen returned to their resting place, and Wen Gelan asked the concubines to come out and find Wen Haran. Help pick up some firewood and something, so that the officials don't use excuses to make trouble, he said. A few people who didn't want to move glanced at the fierce official and dragged their tired bodies to find Wen Haran. Miss, Aunt Chun said as if nothing had happened before, licking her face. Miss, do you still have money? We are a family and need to help each other on the road to exile. Take the silver to buy some mantu from the official. I can't eat the black mantu. Wenju also came over, with a look of, Wen Gelan should have bought money to eat. Sister, quickly take out all the money. Our family can't eat good food, how can you hold the money alone? As she spoke, she reached out to search for Wen Gelan's body and said, Sister, you are really going too far. You have money hidden by yourself and won't give it to us. When Dad comes back, I will report it to him. Wen Gelan reached out and stopped Mrs. Wen, using her good foot to kick over Wen Gyue and then playing with a bag of medicinal powder, saying, It seems that my previous methods were too light, which made your mother and daughter dare to talk to me like this. As soon as Aunt Chun and her daughter saw the package of medicine, they ran away with a whoosh sound and huddled there like avoiding snakes and scorpions, saying, You, don't come over, don't use powder. Officer, please take care of her. Wang Guancha and the round-faced Guancha wanted to manage, but were swept by the cold gaze of the squad leader. The two dared not say a word and huddled aside to continue eating. Mother, why don't we sell Aunt Chun now? Wen Gelan asked with a shallow smile. Madam Wen nodded and said, What you're saying is reasonable. She looked at a few officials and said kindly, Do you know how many of them want to buy Aunt Chun? She's the best at serving men, has many tricks, and the key is the cheap price. Just don't. Aunt Chun saw that the mother and daughter were genuine and was afraid. She begged hard, Madam, I understand my mistake. I beg Madam to hold my hand high and let me live. When the master comes back, she will ask him to make decisions for her. Mrs. Wen ignored her and continued, we only need half a tael of silver. If you find it expensive, the price can be negotiated. If you find it difficult to bring her, you can play with her for 10 copper coins at a time. If Aunt Chun and her daughter were well behaved along the way, she wouldn't do anything. However, this malicious mother and daughter, taking advantage of the assassin's arrival, actually wanted to kill her daughter. How can she tolerate it? 2 or 3 officials looked at Aunt Chun with vulgar eyes, as if she was not wearing clothes. 10 copper coins at a time is quite cost-effective. It's so boring on this road, we need to find some fun. I heard that concubines from wealthy families are the best at playing and serving men. Captain, can we play once? It's only 10 copper coins, what a good deal. The captain lifted his eyelids and said, don't play with people to death. A few officials chuckled and said, Captain, don't worry, we won't play people to death. A government official gave Mrs. Wen 10 copper coins, lifted her pants and belt, and walked towards Aunt Chun, saying, brothers, I'll try how this woman works first. I'll tell you later. Aunt Chun didn't expect it to be like this. She stood up and ran, but she couldn't run as fast as the official who worked for years. She was caught in the hair just a few steps away. Stinky women, dare you run? It's your honor that I can play with you. The official slapped her several times and forcibly dragged her towards the nearby grass. Aunt Chun regretted it, but regretted not killing Madame and Wen Gelan earlier. Madam, I really knew my mistake. Please forgive me, I dare not do it again. Madame Wen ignored it and handed 10 copper coins to Wen Gelan, saying, Gelan, keep it. This mother and daughter used to harm us so many times, but now it's time for us to charge interest. Wen Gelan glanced at the frightened Wang Yu, weighed the copper coin in his hand, and said meaningfully, Mom, I believe the official likes fresh flavors. Coincidentally, we have them here. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Contradictions with Father Inspiration. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Contradictions with Father Inspiration. No. Wen Guyu, who understood, turned pale and said, Mother, sister, I was wrong. I promise not to do anything again. Please don't treat me like this. She is going to marry the woman of the future emperor and cannot be bullied by these lowly officials. Is that right? When Gelan saw the official's calm face return, his eyes slightly changing. Captain, I just saw the footprints of the tiger. The official spat and said, What's so special, there are tigers around here. Be careful tonight. When encountering such a situation, there is no interest in playing with women. Upon hearing this, the team leader made a series of arrangements. Wen Gelan's heart sank, something was wrong. According to the official's tone, there shouldn't be any tigers around here, but there are tigers nearby. It is not ruled out that a tiger has arrived here, but it is also possible that someone intentionally did it. The exile along the way is really unsafe. As soon as Aunt Chun ran back, wrapped in clothes, she heard Wen Haren's voice. Big sister, Wen Haren leaned against her ear and whispered, Dad secretly went over there, saying he wanted to be alone and quiet. I don't think that situation is quite right. Wen Gelan couldn't help but think of that night. She invited Wen Haren to take care of Mrs. Wen and then walked towards the place where Wen Ning was going. After walking for a while, she vaguely heard the faint sound of words. Prince, there are 2 good things that my legitimate daughter can do to help the court. However, Gelan, that child, is unwilling to tell me. What Prime Minister Wen said about good things? Who? The discovered Wen Ge walked over with a sharp and piercing look, ignoring the warnings of the surrounding guards. His eyes were slightly cold, staring at Nan Rongchuan and Wen Ning. Master Wen is really a good courtier who serves the country and the emperor, she sneered. So far, she still doesn't understand anything. The so-called exile is probably a plot between her father and Nan Rongchuan, a calculation for the country and the people. Gelan, how did you speak? Wen Ning frowned and rebuked, "Hurry up and apologize to His Highness the Dark King." Wen Gelan hugged his arm and said coolly, "Oh, that's really sorry. I disturbed the conversation between the two of you. It happened that the Prince of the Underworld was here. Could you please be a witness? I want to immediately sever my father-daughter relationship with Mr. Wen." As soon as the words, "sever the father-daughter relationship," were spoken, Nan Rongchuan narrowed his sharp eyes, and Wen Ning was shocked to the point where her expression lost control. "Gelan, what are you doing?" Wen Ning lost her voice. Wen Gelan smiled without any warmth and said, "I will sever my father-daughter relationship with you. In fact, I should have done this as early as the day I was exiled by family members. Fortunately, I was thinking at the time that you were my father, and we were exiled again. We had to unite as a family. However, your family only had Aunt Chun and her daughter, and we were not your family at all. The key is, for the sake of your country, why should I continue to protect your father when your people can push me to death?" Wen Ning opened her mouth, but couldn't say a word. Miss Wen really wants to sever her father-daughter relationship with Prime Minister Wen. Nan Rongchuan looked at Wen Gelan coldly, realizing that this woman was completely different. She is no longer disgusted and disdainful towards him, but rather indifferent towards strangers. More importantly, she is distant and does not want to have any relationship with him. How could a person's changes be so significant? Wen Gelan nodded firmly and said, "Yes. Gelan, being a father is sorry for you and your mother." Before Wen Ning could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Wen Gelan raising his hand. "Master Wen, when you chose not to keep your promise to my mother, there was no longer any father-daughter relationship between you and me. Apart from the court, what you valued were Aunt Chun and her daughter. I really don't want to have too much interaction with you. Gelan, you are confused. How can you be as confused as your mother?" Wen Ning said with a stern face, "As ministers, we should serve the country and the people. If you have such good things, you should take them out." Wen Gelan laughed angrily and said, "You are a vassal, my mother and I are not. If you want to serve the country and the people, you have to ignore the life and death of your family. Do you have to take the life of your family to do credit for you?" As she spoke more, her anger rubbed upwards and said, "If it weren't for your own selfish interests, my mother would have almost fainted. She would have suffered such a big crime. And my big brother and the others would not even be able to drink a sip of water. You, and you." She pointed to Nan Rongchuan without concealing her disgust. "I don't mind you two giving everything for the country and the people, but it doesn't mean you want to harm others for your own benefit. Bastard." Wen Ning slapped her in the face and said angrily, "Who gave you the courage to speak to His Highness the Underworld like this? This is my own idea and has nothing to do with His Highness the Underworld. Kneel down quickly and apologize to His Highness the Underworld." Wen Gelan pressed his tongue against the inside, his eyes freezing inch by inch. "Prime Minister Wen, you made a mistake." Upon hearing Nan Rongchuan's words, Wen Gelan was momentarily stunned. Nan Rongchuan frowned slightly and said somewhat displeased, "Miss Wen was not wrong. Even if we are serving the country and the people, we cannot harm the lives of innocent people. Besides, those are your family. Are you ignoring their life and death like this? Your Highness, if they can sacrifice their lives for the country and the people, it would be their honor," Wen Ning said passionately, "I am no exception. I can sacrifice my life for the country and the people." Nan Rongchuan pressed his brow, feeling a bit unsure of how to persuade Wen Ning. Prime Minister Wen is good everywhere and truly thinks for the country and the people, except that he can give everything for the country and the people. Just like this plan, after the Crown Prince and he disagreed, Prime Minister Wen actually did it privately. If it weren't for the Crown Prince and him knowing in advance, it would have been unknown what kind of outcome the Prime Minister Wen Cheng would have made of this matter. "Oh my, Mr. Wen is really a good courtier of your Majesty." Wen Gelan applauded, his yin-yang strange airway. Wen Ning was still scolding her, but when she came into contact with her cold and disgusted eyes, her whole body stiffened in place. Gelan treated him, Miss Wen, I will handle this matter as soon as possible, said Nan Rongchuan. Wen Gelan sneered lightly, how can the Dark King handle it properly? With such a father, our family will eventually die at his hands. So, please ask the Underworld King to make it up to me and Grandpa Wen to sever our father-daughter relationship. Nan Rongchuan could tell that she really wanted to sever her father-daughter relationship. Miss Wen, it's not so easy to sever the father-daughter relationship. According to the law, children who sever their father-daughter relationship must have a needle rolling board to survive in order to sever the relationship. Wen Gelan retrieved this law from his memory, his face looking a bit unpleasant. Then I will have to die and have no contact with Mr. Wen. Gelan, you can have no contact with me in old age or death, but please tell His Highness the Underworld about those two things, which are very important to the court. Wen Ying hunched her body. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Completely disappointed with him. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Completely disappointed with him. Wen Gelan only felt ridiculous and sarcastic, looking at Wen Ying with a stranger's gaze and saying, what qualifications do you have to ask me to take out those two things? Just for the sake of your country and your people. Since you want to give everything for your country and your people, why didn't you choose to blame someone and insist on pulling us together? In other words, you are selfish and afraid of death, using us to achieve your plans and ambitions. Wen Ying heard someone say this to him for the first time, and this person is still his legitimate daughter. You bastard! What do you know as a woman? If I don't do this, those people will take your lives. Wen Gelan's tongue twirled in her mouth, unsure of what expression to use. At least those people are enemies, and you. Mr. Wen, as my mother's husband, big brother, and their father, you personally pushed them to death. Does your conscience have no sense of guilt or self-blame? Will your conscience not hurt? Before Wen Ying could answer, she continued, you have no conscience. In your eyes, we are chess pieces that seek benefits for you and Aunt Chun and her daughter. How could you care about the life and death of the chess pieces? You only care about whether the chess pieces can bring you the expected benefits. Wen Ying was furious when she first discovered Wen Gelan's sharp teeth and mouth, and said, Wen Gelan, you are too unfilial. As a daughter, how can you speak to your father like that? Being a father. Wen Gelan sneered as if hearing a joke, may I ask Mr. Wen, where do you look like a father? For your own benefit, you pushed your family to death, and you said so grandly. You make me feel nauseous, from the bottom of my heart. The words, disgusting, stimulated Wen Ying, who glared angrily at Wen Gelan but couldn't speak. Wen Gelan let out a long breath, as if to exhale the hint of melancholy and desolation in his heart. She understood that it was the last remaining emotion of her original body. She stared at Nan Rongchuan with sharp eyes and extended two fingers, saying, I'll make a deal with the underworld. Can you promise me two conditions? Nan Rongchuan glanced at his unconscious legs and rolled his fingers to lightly tap the armrest of the wheelchair. What deal are you going to make with me? The words spoken by Wen Gelan shook him deeply. But what she said was neither rough nor rough. As she said, Prime Minister Wen must give everything for the country and the people, and should not use the lives of his family to do these things. He is fully capable of settling down his own family. This woman is decisive and ruthless, with a clear mind and a good wrist. How could a person's changes be so significant? Wen Gelan's gaze fell on his legs and he said, I'll help you fix your legs. You promise me two conditions. Don't worry, it's not two conditions that will make you difficult. I have never heard of Miss Wen being skilled in medicine, said Nan Rongchuan in a low voice. Wen Gelan remained calm and said calmly, you haven't heard of it either. I dare to do something to sever ties with my blood-related father. I believe the underworld knows that they cannot see a person from outside or from what they hear. Nan Rongchuan was very clear about this. He squinted his eyes and looked at the woman in front of him, saying, Miss Wen has changed a lot. Before, whenever you saw me, you either cried or didn't like me, but now you are negotiating terms with me." Wen Gelan shrugged and spread his hands. Just as he was about to say something, he heard Wen Ying's words. "Gelan, don't be rude to His Highness the Underworld. If you can really help His Highness heal his legs, immediately help him heal his legs." Wen Gelan turned around and walked away, unwilling to stay for a second. If she stays any longer, she will really beat Mr. Wen to death. Returning to her resting place, she was grabbed by Lady Wen. "Gelan, don't sleep to death tonight, I'm afraid there will be tigers here." Mrs. Wen's fingers trembled lightly, and her eyes were very firm. She must protect Gelan well. Wen Gelan noticed that there was panic and unease pervading the small hill. Except for a few officials, the rest of the people were all flustered, with some timid sipping. She stuffed several packets of medicinal powder into Mrs. Wen's hand and whispered, "Mother, use it when in danger." "I still have quite a few." Madame Wen refused to accept it and forcefully pushed it back into Wen Gelan's hand, saying, "You keep Gelan. I'm not afraid of tigers." Listening to her trembling voice, Wen Gelan's heart was warm, sour and astringent. "Mother, that person told the Underworld King what he promised you. He and the Underworld King are secretly plotting something." Madame Wen was so angry that she trembled all over with anger upon hearing this. How could he do anything to harm you? He is a useless father. He is a useless father. Wen Gelan gently patted her back, helping her to calm down, and said in a very plain tone, "Mom, he has always been just Wen Gelan's father. Have he really taken care of me and Big Brother over the years? Mom, there's no need to be angry, there's no need." Madame Wen felt extremely heartbroken upon hearing this. She hugged Wen Gelan and said, "It's my mother who apologized to you. If my mother had been more aggressive and ruthless in those years, I wouldn't have let Aunt Chun and her daughter act recklessly, and I wouldn't have let you suffer so much." Wen Gelan shook her head slowly and leaned against her, saying, "Mom, there's nothing wrong. I've been very happy since I was young, having a good mother like you." Her original body did indeed think so, and her only regret was that her father was not good to her like he was to Wen Gelan. Madame Wen wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes with her dirty sleeves and said, "Gelan, don't worry about what that person is doing in the dark. Mom has a way to solve these problems. In this life, she only wants to take good care of her daughter and not worry about those messy things anymore." Wen Gelan thought she was going to ask for help from the Zhu family and advised, "Mother, the Zhu family won't help us. If we have an accident, the Zhu family hasn't made a statement, how could they help us? The overall atmosphere of the Zhu family is not very good. I didn't really like the Zhu family and rarely went to them since I was young. Especially for that cousin Zhu Yi, if you can't see her, you can't see her. This cousin is someone who has been trying her best since she was young. She always wants to do her best, but she is being held back by her original self in all aspects. She is not only calculating her original self openly and secretly, but also making sarcastic remarks everywhere." Madame Wen said indifferently, "The Zhu family is just a white-eyed wolf. I have an idea." Wen Gelan was worried that she might act recklessly and advised, "Mother, don't do anything that shouldn't be done." Madame Wen lightly tapped her forehead twice and said angrily, "My mother still wants to see you get married and help you take care of your children. How could you do something foolish?" Wen Gelan's mouth twitched and said, "That's good. My mother thinks so much. Master, please take care of Madam and Miss, they are going to sell their concubines." Upon hearing Aunt Chun's complaint, Wen Gelan's expression was indifferent. She pulled Lady Wen to sit next to Wen Haran and the others. End of this chapter.